All right. Okay, we just opened the door and we're going to see who's coming in. Oh, look.
Wow, look
Oh
at
my
that.
goodness, they're pouring in.
Wow.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Well, so as you can see, we're doing this a little bit differently today. And I am actually on the stage with our speaker today. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. And I am very excited about that. And we just had some differences early, some really actually kind of serious differences about, this age-old ongoing kind of like, oh, this disagreement. Who's better, Apple or Microsoft? Who's better? And frankly, I don't think it's a matter of better. I think it's a matter of saying, I know how to use this one. You know how to use that one.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, we weren't doing a real good job of communicating to each other.
Well, let's just say that our systems weren't. We were great. Our systems
Very
were
good.
not.
We were deliberately listening to one
We
another.
were. And
Computers
I
were
was
not.
misunderstanding because I didn't know. And I thought, well, just do the thing. And you're like, I don't do that thing. And I'm like, oh God. So we had to disagree. Well, I don't want to say disagreement. That sounds like we
weren't disagreeing.
So I was misunderstanding. It was so misunderstanding.
So we had an interesting start so far.
We did.
And we're just happy everybody is here.
Everybody.
And I can see that people are doing that thing that I love, which is say hello, tell us where you're from, and what kind of job you do. And as you might have noticed, there's this lovely woman sitting next to me. Her name is, oh God, am I going to pronounce this correctly? Ronnie Polaneczky. Oh shit, I blew it, didn't I?
But that's not even a misunderstanding because you were trying so hard. No, it's actually Ronnie Polaneczky. If you pretend that the CZ is an S, all is well.
Polaneczky.
Yeah, the CZ throws everybody off. Or just call me Ronnie P.
Oh, okay.
Always, that's what everybody.
Okay, that's easy to say.
Too hard.
But I will share this with everyone that I feel like I've known Ronnie for so many years. And that's because I grew up with a father who read newspapers. And so as a young child, I started reading newspapers. And then as I became an adult, I love reading newspapers. And I say plural because it's not just the Philadelphia newspapers I would read, but I like reading newspapers from all over. And Ronnie has been one of my favorite journalists for quite some time.
Thank you.
And I'll share this one story, and then we'll get started. That I remember Ronnie going back to the Daily News, the Inquirer, but during the pandemic, that was not, it was a very difficult time for me and just about everybody on the planet. And I was isolated and alone, which was particularly difficult, and there was, oh, she forgot to turn it on. Hey, everybody out there, okay, thank you. And so she wrote a Sunday column, and I'm still one of the few people that is receiving a physical Philadelphia Inquirer paper every day. And I looked forward to that newspaper showing up on my door every Sunday and flip through to what's the upside.
Oh, that's so great.
And, and so Ronnie wrote great upside stories during the pandemic. And it was one of those things that I remember as being a good part of the pandemic. And so with that said,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, we're already up to 300 and it keeps moving, 340 people. All right, welcome everyone.
Yeah, hey everybody.
Welcome to the Power of Deliberate Listening, Listening with Ronnie, provided by the PA Care Partnership in association with the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services grant. And anytime during our presentation today, if you have a question, run your mouse along the bottom of the screen and you will see the Q&A option. And please place your questions in there. We have two moderators today. We have Jamal Ford, that handsome man that you see up there on the screen, and he is in charge. He's in charge of the Q&A, and we'll keep track of your questions. And because I'm sitting here with Ronnie today and we're kind of doing this together, Jamal is also going to be keeping his eye on the chat. So if you have any questions or you need anything, throw that in the chat, and the lovely Jamal Ford will be there to answer your questions. And I, Nancy Massey, will be sitting here with Ronnie, and we will today be learning about deliberate listening, and we will walk away with the 12 steps of deliberate listening to use as we continue our journey of being a deliberate listener. And at this point, we're not doing that. Okay, sorry, we're not doing that. You will be receiving a copy of the 12 steps of deliberate listening, and that'll be part of what you'll receive after the webinar, when I send out those emails to everybody afterwards. So now, formally introducing Ronnie P.
There you go. That's the way.
A certified positive psychology practitioner. I just learned about this, was new to me. And Jamal is putting her website link into the chat for us. Ronnie combines her years of experience as an award-winning journalist with her training in positive psychology to help individuals, teams, and organizations tell bigger, better, truer stories about who they are, what they do, the amazing ways they do it, and why it matters. She also models and teaches us how to be deliberate listeners. And wait until you hear her stories. And from here, I'm turning it over to Ronnie. But first, we need to share screen and
let's get up to.
get the PowerPoint on the screen.
We have a couple moving parts here, and we're figuring it all out together. So there we go.
And then I go up. Oh no, that's not the one I wanted. Wait,
Well, this is the one.
no, this is inside the.
Pull up the
Wait,
regular
this
PowerPoint,
one.
Nancy.
No,
It should already be open at the bottom. And if you go to your PowerPoint.
Let me start over again. Aren't you glad that I'm not the one who usually does this? This is the one we wanted. Is this the one we wanted? Yeah. And I go to share, and then I
scooch all the way up.
go up here. Look, she's already
Go
telling me.
to slideshow
And then I go to slideshow, and then I go to.
from the
Set.
beginning. From the beginning, all the way to
From the
the,
beginning, there it is. Yeah.
Yep. there you go.
Jamal's talking me through this,
Okay.
everyone.
Yay,
All right.
we did that.
So Jamal, can
Okay.
everybody see? Are they putting that in the chat? Everybody's good? They're seeing it?
You're good. You're muted, but you're good.
I have to talk.
There you go. There you go. We can hear you now.
We're so good. We're so good.
Thank you. And
Can I just say, I love that it's messy.
yeah,
No, I do love it. I love that it's messy. Life is messy. And the best thing we can do is say, I guess we're human. I guess we're just going to figure this out. And so this to me feels like the perfect setup to talk about listening,
Great.
because it's about trying, getting it wrong, apologizing, getting it right, learning, moving forward. So yay.
thank you, Ronnie. Okay. So can I turn it over to you now?
Yeah, you
And
can.
and say, what is deliberate listening?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about deliberate listening in a few minutes. What I want to do first is tell you a story that I think perfectly shows what good listening can do and what can result because of it. And I want to tell a story because I'm a journalist, I'm a storyteller, and this is a cool story because it's about Hollywood. And so that's always the best story. So let me just scooch the screen forward. Here we go. Okay, now you may have seen, I'm sure you've all heard about a little animation studio called Pixar. And if you're not familiar with the name Pixar, you're certainly probably familiar with its animations. They did Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Ratatouille, Cars, The Incredibles, Inside Out, just all these sort of household animation names. They all came from Pixar. So we all know about Pixar, but I don't think a lot of people know that Pixar did not begin as a movie studio, and it only became a movie studio because of some amazing piece of listening that changed everything. So just some really quick background. Pixar began, it was founded by Steve Jobs of Apple, and he founded it as a high-end hardware and computer graphics software company. He wanted to develop the most amazing 3D animation software, but they also needed hardware that was powerful enough to run it. So this stuff was really expensive. I think each computer station was, I'm going to probably mess this up, it was like at least, it was a lot of money. It was like well over 150, maybe $300,000. So to run their very special animation software, you had to buy one of their very expensive pieces of hardware. People saw the stuff, they loved it, but things were not going well. They weren't selling many of them at all. So people were panicking. Steve Jobs was mostly panicking. He brought in a guy, and this is, to me, the unsung hero of this thing, a manufacturing executive named Chuck Holstad. And Chuck came in, and his job was to figure out where to cut, to cut fat if there was any. One of the things that one of the departments that he visited was there was a little animation group, and they were part of the marketing group of Pixar. And their job was really to create these little animations that they could then use to kind of market the software stuff to potential customers. And these guys were actually like, they weren't just, sort of run-of-the-mill designers. They were like real creatives. They really loved this stuff. So Chuck Holstad came into them and said, look, we're cutting jobs around here. There's Steve Jobs is losing a lot of money every day, and we have to figure out how to put some money back in. So I'm wondering, do you guys have any ideas about how you can start making some money for the company? And so what they were up against too was that eventually Steve Jobs would go on to sell the hardware part of the company and keep the animation part of the company, but he still never thought it would be a motion picture studio. He thought that he could hang on to that long enough for some other company to create hardware that was cheap enough for people to use that. And I say all of that just to make the point that him being head of a movie studio was never in his sights. Okay, so let's get back to Chuck Holstad. He's with these guys who work in the marketing department. And he's like, do you have any ideas? And they're thinking, and I think they were very hesitant to tell him the thing they thought would make money. And what it was about a year before, maybe, they had created a really hilarious animation. And it won an Oscar for a best animated short. It was about a gigantic baby. It's very funny. If you go online, go to YouTube, it's great. So they did that just to be creative. But what happened was different ad agencies had seen that, and they were like, that is the coolest thing ever. We would like some of that our clients could use. And the animators sort of ignored those requests because they thought, we're like real creative types. And usually, ad agencies sort of develop their own, they're called, storyboards or whatever. And so they would want to come in and tell the animators how to do what they wanted to have done. And the animators said to Chuck Holstad, we could make money doing that, but honestly, we would hate it. We would hate it, and it's not what we do best. And Holstad listened to them and said, all right, how about this? We will do it, but we will only take the jobs where you get to be the creatives, where you get to come up with this stuff. And they're like, oh, okay, let's try it. So I think in the first year they made about, I'm going to mess up the money part, but they made really some impressive money. And they did these commercials. And if you're old enough, you may remember this, because when we first saw them, it's very commonplace now, but these commercials, the very first one I saw was for lifesavers. And they had these lifesavers that sort of danced across the TV screen. And I was telling Nancy and Jamal earlier, I remember being at home in the kitchen cooking, and my husband's in the living room, and he's like, you got to see this. And we're like looking like, what is the television doing? And so that stuff was so cool. And then they went on to do commercials for like Volkswagen and oh gosh, I forget the other ones right now, but they did a lot. All of this was able, I will say this, they were able to hang on to their jobs while other people were getting laid off. So that's the one good thing. But the cool thing is that these things finally became popular enough that they then worked with Disney to make a little movie called Toy Story. So as we all know, Toy Story, no one had ever seen anything like it. It was an amazing movie. The animation was crazy. People didn't know what they were looking at. The story was great. It was just really, really great work. So then they went on to do, let's just take a quick look here. They went on to do Finding Nemo. I love that. Dory, look at her. She's so cute. Finding Nemo, Bug's Life.
Born to be Wild.
Born to be Wild. But look at little Dory. Look at little Dory. So anyway, because of that, and then literally within, so they actually, Pixar had been on the verge of bankruptcy. They wanted to sell. Steve Jobs wanted to sell them to Microsoft for 120 million. Microsoft said only 90. No, they sort of hung in there, and eventually then they were bought by Disney, and I think the number was $7.4 billion. So they went from the verge of bankruptcy to $7.4 billion. I'm going to say mostly because one guy said, "What do you got?" And then he actually listened. So that is listening in a big macro sense of what can happen.
You know, I'm listening to you talk,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice? And I bet there are a lot of people out there right now thinking, I wish my boss would listen to me.
Right.
And
Right.
so, you know, I'm like very excited about this.
Yeah.
So this Pixar is a great story. I love it. How can we translate that into our lives in the small groups where we work, in the type of work that we do?
Mhm.
What does deliberate listening look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I will say that on a smaller scale, to me, that's where it matters most. That's where most people live, right?
Yeah.
Like we live in teams, we live in our workplaces. What I love about this is it shows in a way that nobody can deny that listening mattered. And it really, really delivered. And so I will say that there's no reason why similar listening can't help all of us if we listen to understand, if we listen as a way to understand, to learn. And it's not necessarily going to happen on the Pixar scale, but in small teams. And why this really matters, especially in the workplace, is that listening is the current that runs through every skill that we value in workplace behavior. And these skills are what we normally call soft skills, right? So these skills are the ability to say, collaborate. I'm just going to list them off here. To collaborate, to pivot, something's kind of different than what you thought you were going to be. How do you pivot? To inspire people who are feeling down, to motivate people who are discouraged, to bounce back from adversity, to problem solve, to foster innovation, all of that. All of those behaviors, the one through line, there's probably many through lines through them, but the one that really comes up is listening. So how well you listen is going to impact the quality of those other skills that are invaluable in a workplace. So, and research shows that will then impact directly, not just a project's outcome at your job, but also employees' feelings of engagement, creativity, contribution, retention, and really critically, belonging.
I very strongly relate to the belonging.
Yeah.
I know that certainly, you know, again, during the pandemic,
Yeah.
it's a rough time.
Mm.
And for a lot of us, and I saw a lot of people I know that moved away to be with family,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that belonging is so critical.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that as an important part of our workplace. Can you talk to us more about that?
It is really important, and I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic. Let me just flip to a new slide here. Here we go. So last year there was a report done by McKinsey and Company. Some of you may have heard of them, and they were looking at the reasons behind what we call the great resignation. You know, like after the pandemic, it's like, why aren't people coming back to work? McKinsey called it the great attrition. It's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found in this survey, they found that, I'm going to read this off here, more than half of the employees who left their job in the prior 6 months, number one, did not feel valued by their organization. That was 54%. Like, that's a big chunk.
Yeah.
Or they did not feel valued by their manager, 52%. Or they lacked a sense of belonging, that's 51%. So those are big numbers. On the flip side, and this is according to research from BetterUp Labs, we're just going to read this stuff off too. Employees who reported feeling a sense of belonging at work experienced, get this, 92% more growth professionally, 83% more growth personally, a 36% stronger sense of well-being, and 24% more feelings of resilience. So to me, you know, you could always wait the way Pixar did until everything is on the brink of collapse before you actually start doing these things that help people feel like they belong, et cetera. You can wait to listen deliberately and closely to people. until everything is on the brink of collapse. Or you could just start, like you could just start doing it now. And if you deliberately own your own listening practice, you can listen in a way that will strengthen and actually yield more of that good stuff that we're all looking for, including better belonging for all of us. So this practice that we're about to talk about, I call it deliberate listening. And I call it deliberate because it means that you do it on purpose. You know, like I know before I really started kind of looking into this, there's sometimes I was a really good listener, but it was almost coincidental. Some factors lined up that I didn't line them up, and somehow it all worked. And it looked like magic, but I would not be able to replicate it because I don't know. It's just the planets aligned, you know.
What was the trigger?
Right. What was the trigger? Exactly. What was the aligning force that got it all together? So I thought there's got to be a way to do this on purpose, like to just develop these skills. So what I realized just in doing all this is that we are able to listen in a way that gets beyond our own biases, our own opinions, beliefs, and our experiences. It doesn't mean that you don't have those things. You're just able to kind of transcend them in the moment so that you can actually hear the people around you. Okay, so we're going to get to the basics here. Okay, so deliberate listening. I'll tell you this, it has 12 characteristics. Please do not, and I mean this, do not think you have to do all of these at once. You don't. But there are 12 characteristics of deliberate listening. And even if you only do one or two, you only remember one or two, I guarantee you that could really alter some of your ways of listening. So here we go. So here's the first 6. So the first one, adjust your mindset. Now, what do I mean by that? So during this kind of an interaction, you're going to make a conscious decision to learn about the speaker from the speaker. Just remember, the speaker is the expert on themselves. They're the expert on their opinions, and they have so much to tell you. So right now, you are going to make the decision to focus on them, hearing them, getting to know them. Number 2, you want to ditch your distractions. Now, everybody says this, and I get it. So you don't want to multitask. You want to close your laptop, take off your headphones, even if they're turned off, take them off. And please, please, please get this. You want to flip back there, Nance, thanks. You want to get rid of your cell phone. And when I say get rid of it, I don't mean leave it on the table. I mean, put it out of view, because there is research shows that just the presence of these mobile communication devices, they can really shape the quality of the relationship in that setting. So turn them off, put them away. The third one, suspend your right to be right.
Oh, this is a challenge.
Well, this is a challenge, and here's why. We're Americans. We have an amendment that says we have a right to our opinions. So
we're independent.
We are so independent. So you want to suspend that. I didn't say kill it. I didn't say ignore it. I didn't say don't believe it. I mean, put it aside. And you want to do that so you can hear what your right to be right, your right to have an opinion, might be keeping you from hearing. Because if you're too caught up in that in the moment, you will not hear the person in front of you. So in other words, this is also the time when you do not want to say, I disagree. Let me tell you why. Don't. Don't. For now, you don't have to. Or you can't say, well, that doesn't make sense. Instead, you're going to want to substitute curiosity for judgment. And for example, you might say, wow, I'm curious. How did you come to think of that?
I like the way you're saying to be curious, but you also said judgment. Yeah. And I think that once you even think it without saying it, you're showing that you're being judgmental. That person is feeling it.
Right.
We don't want to be judgmental.
Right.
And also, we don't necessarily mean to be judgmental.
We don't. And also to suspend your judgment doesn't mean that you don't suspend discernment. There's a difference, so you want to see, we need judgment. We use judgment every day. Is that stove hot or isn't it? But in this case, you want to suspend it there. The fourth thing, you want to wait until the speaker has finished speaking before thinking about your response. So right now, if you are speaking, you're not quite done. And in my head, I'm going, oh, yeah. I'm going to tell her this and this and this. I'm so busy crafting a response and I'm kind of missing what the rest of you're saying. Like, I want to be able to hear all of it. And when you're done, I might think, well, gosh, I haven't thought about what I wanted to say, but I could say, like, it's okay to pause. Like, it's really okay to pause and say, wow, you said a lot there. So you can wait. You can just breathe into it a little bit. The fifth one is that you want to repeat the last few words or kind of the gist of what the speaker has said. And you're doing that to let them know that you're taking their lead in this interaction. So this way they know that your listening is informed by their frame of reference, not yours. The sixth one, you want to ask open-ended questions. Journalists do this all the time. You want to ask who, what, when, where, why, how, because those are open-ended questions that invite more information to come back. If I were to ask Nancy sort of a question that has only a yes or no answer, like, did you eat breakfast today? She would say, yes. But if I said, it smells great in here, what did you make for breakfast? Different answer, right?
Yeah.
So you want to ask the open-ended questions. That's number 6. Let's skip to the next slide. Okay. And then number 7, here's the thing. You want to acknowledge the speaker's emotion, but honestly, you want to also be careful that you don't jump to any conclusions. Oh, no. That was the next one. I'm so sorry. I'm so excited. So here's the thing. You want to, that's right. You want to acknowledge their emotion. In other words, you might be able to say, wow, I see that you're really frustrated, or you sound frustrated. So you want to acknowledge it. They may say, actually, I'm not frustrated at all. I'm angry, or I'm really sad. In that case, you could say, oh, I misunderstood. Could you tell me that? Even if you kind of get it wrong, showing your attempt to understand really is important, and it shows goodwill. And it can really help to build just some trust and some relatedness. Okay, this is what I got all excited about. You want to notice body language, but you don't want to jump, Nancy. Actually, that's interesting. Now, here's the thing. You don't want to jump to conclusions about it. So if Nancy suddenly goes like this, I might think, oh, she's being confrontational. She might have had, she has like a, like a pain in her back. And suddenly if she just turns, it can relieve that. Notice it. You don't want to jump to any conclusions about it, but it can give you clues if you get curious about it, but just be careful. Number 9, use your own body language to show that you're paying attention. So that means that as Nancy's talking, I might go, oh, wow. Or I might go, or I might nod, or I might cross. Yeah, exactly. And you don't even have to say much, but just go, oh my gosh. Your cat did that.
Oh,
Really, that cat. So you could use your own body language. This one's important, number 10. You don't want to quickly counter the speaker's story with one of your own. Like if Nancy said, oh my God, I was outside. I fell right on the ice today. She's about to tell me what happened. And I go, oh my God, that happened to me once. Listen to this. Last year I fell, and then my brother fell. It was a mess. Oh my God, I'm in the hospitals. Poor Nancy has not even had a chance. She's in the middle of her story, and I have totally stop her momentum. Save it. And plus, even if your experiences sound similar, I will say that the urge to do that is usually we're just feeling empathic, and we want to say that I understand, I get it. But remember that someone else's experience may look similar, but it's still uniquely theirs, and yours is uniquely yours. So you don't want to presume that your circumstances and your reactions are an exact mirror of theirs. You can always get to it later. But for now, I want to hear about Nancy's fall on the ice.
Ronnie, something just came up, and I wanted to stop you just because Nicole just put in the chat. Well, she put in the Q&A actually, but she said, could you elaborate on a better way to empathize?
A better way to empathize. I'd love to speak directly to Nicole just to hear what she said. I mean, I don't know that there's a bad way to empathize. Empathy is empathy.
Can we get Nicole up?
Yeah, can we get Nicole
up on the screen? Nicole, you willing to come up on the screen with us?
Or actually, you know what? We're almost at number 12. Maybe give Nicole a chance to figure out if we can get her up on the screen.
I'll message with her and see if.
Okay, yeah, great question. Okay, number 11. Let pauses do their magic. What that means, and boy, I've been guilty of this. Someone is talking. They kind of finish. Seems like they might have more to say, and I am uncomfortable with their pause. And I want to try to fill that pause by saying something, anything. Or sometimes, look, it's never terrible. It's never terrible. But sometimes in that pause is where people get a chance to breathe. And if you don't immediately say anything, they don't feel hurried. And in that pause is where maybe they've gotten a chance to sort of absorb the meaning of something that they just said. And now they want to actually say a little bit more about that. So I would say if you could give it 5 seconds before you say anything. Like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, like, and if it starts to feel, hold on 1 second. Nancy, okay?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to lose her. So in those pauses is where more things can happen. And you could always say, you could just say, wow, anything more? You know, you could do that. So do not be afraid of pauses. And then
So-
finally, number 12. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish 12 and
Okay.
then we'll bring Nicole up on the screen.
Yeah,
And
okay, good. All
we'll
right.
have a
Oh, this
conversation.
is so fun.
Oh,
This is
it
so
is.
fun. Yeah. Okay. So then 12, you want to summarize what you heard and then ask if you got it right. You know, you can say, I heard you. Whoops. Let me just get this back. I think we just. There we go. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, you want to summarize what you just heard. And then, you know, you want to say, did I get that right? And they're going to know that you weren't just listening to hear, you were listening to understand. And that's important.
Listening to hear
Yeah.
and to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
not just hear, but to understand.
understand.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have, is it Nicole?
You got her?
I am trying
He's
to
working at it.
promote her to panelist now. There she is.
Oh, she's getting a promotion.
Oh, a
And we're gonna
promotion.
Unmute
Does
her.
that come with a company car? That's a promotion, right?
We
Nicole,
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, Nicole.
Oh,
I wish
okay,
we
here,
could
I'll
see
turn
you.
my video on.
Oh, hi,
Welcome.
Nicole.
Oh, this is exciting.
Oh, look at you. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for making space for me. Wonderful.
Sure, have at it. Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of times in case management, we are, you know, we try to navigate boundaries with a
Mhm.
balance. And part of empathy is to us sharing stories and sharing that commonality. And
Mm.
so what other ways can we utilize empathy through sharing stories? Like how is there a better way to do that so it doesn't feel like you're chalking it up to, well, I feel the same way and it's not that hard, or I feel the same way and let's move on.
Yeah. Well, we have a cat that just crossed the desk here. That is, whoa, we almost lost a smoothie. This is just going off the rails in the best way. I love when this happens. I would say, first of all, I just want to say, Nicole, thank you for the work you do. I mean, as a frontline person, you know, you are right there. And I bet that you already do amazing listening. So we're just going to throw that out there. I think you already do amazing listening. Is she still up on the screen, Shema?
she is.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Oh, okay, good. So I would say, as someone is sharing a story, you could probably just say the things that I think you probably already do really well. Like, oh my gosh, that sounds really hard. Or it sounds like you're really going through it. What do you think you would need? You know, you could ask some of that stuff. Sometimes if you're not sure if it's okay to share a story or if it's time, you could simply ask them. You could just say, boy, what you're saying is kind of reminding me of something that happened to me. I didn't know if you would like to hear it or not. You don't have to hear it, but it's just bringing up a thought. And I'm wondering if some of it wouldn't be similar or might provide you a little bit of insight. You know, would you like me to share that?
That's
Oftentimes-
great.
Yeah, because oftentimes people will just be like, oh, you asked. And then
Yeah.
they say, or they might even say, you know, I don't think I can hear anymore. And you can say, then let me just get you a hot towel and we're going to take care of you. But I think just simply asking, you know, we forget that that's okay to do. You know, I think we're so sometimes like we have so much empathy and we so don't want to offend and we don't want to make anything worse, but we're also playing a guessing game. And the person best equipped to let us know if we would offend is the very person we're afraid of offending. And I think if we take the time to ask them, I think they just feel I think they feel seen. And it's like, wow, that was a very respectful thing, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So in taking your training, I've been thinking about crisis intervention because we're coming up with something at our agency to kind of mitigate crises. And, you know, so I think also the idea of putting that person in control is
Oh,
almost
wow.
like a useful skill by asking them, like, this is
Mhm.
wonderful to ask them, because it's also giving them back that control that they may feel totally out of, where they're in total crisis mode. And you are providing a wonderful chance to have listening and support. But, you know, the opportunity to ask them, would you like to hear something that happened to me? Or would you like to hear a story that reminds me of this? Or do you think that's a good idea too, as you're walking through crisis steps, is like,
Yeah.
this is great. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. And that is so respectful. You know, I mean, as you say that, it occurs to me that sometimes when people are in, are in a crisis and they're seeking help, they might feel that there's like a power imbalance because they're the one who is vulnerable and they're coming to you for help. And even though it's all good, I mean, you're there for the best reasons, asking them those questions can even sort of bring a perception, not even a perception, but sort of say, look, I'm human too. Like, we're both human. Here we are. So it can really help build some rapport there that is so respectful and recognizes, to a certain degree, different kinds of agency, I guess, oh, we lost you. You're
Nope,
muted.
she was
Oh, she's
muted.
back. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, there goes
I have a crying 2-year-old.
What is okay?
I got all
Well,
things.
thank you for the question, Nicole. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you
Thank
coming
you,
on the
Nicole.
call
Yeah,
and having
that
a
was
chat.
great.
That was
And
awesome.
thanks to everyone in the chat. They've offered some wonderful resources and ideas. It's great.
Oh, I
Oh,
love when that happens.
Thank you,
That's
Nicole,
Yeah.
for letting me know that, because
Yeah.
I'll let everyone know that any resources that are suggested in the chat will be part of a document that I'll create tonight after the webinar, and we'll share with everyone who's here, so that if they're looking for that type of resource,
Beautiful.
we can provide it,
Beautiful.
and then they can share it with whomever they would like to do to share it with also. So that's one. Isn't it wonderful when this happens?
Oh
I
my
love it
gosh,
when
it's
this
like
happens.
crowdsourcing in the best way. I love this. I love it.
And I think all of this is making a lot of sense
Yeah.
to all of us.
Mhm.
And I'm going to guess that maybe every one of us
Mhm.
have heard these things. Every
Totally.
one of us
Mhm.
have had an opportunity to think about those things, or to experience them in a really positive way, like you were saying.
Mhm.
But it's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
It's hard when you've got a cat that suddenly has decided that he loves having Ronnie here and he wants to be a part of it. And I'm trying to focus on Ronnie and keeping everything good for
I'm
you.
just going to move my glass of water because he looks thirsty.
And so,
Yeah.
when these things are going on in our lives,
Mhm.
it can distract us, and not because we're not trying. This is not necessarily an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So can you
Yeah.
help us with that?
You hit it. That's why I call this section
The
this next
yeah,
section,
but
the yeah, but it's like, yeah, that all sounds great. God, that's wonderful. I want to live in a world where it's like that. But because it's hard. And you could say, look, I actually know this. I know how to listen. I know I should do it more, even in the midst of me snapping at my kid or snubbing someone. I know that's not the right thing to do. What is wrong with me? Like, what's wrong with me? And I have a really, really good news answer. The answer is
good.
nothing. There is nothing wrong with you.
Oh, good.
Because it is not you, like you, Nancy, you, Nikki, you, Jamal, Ronnie, that's getting locked up. It's our brain that's doing it. And our brain is doing it. Let's zip up to number 12. Our brain is doing it for reason. This is just a fun one. You don't have to memorize any of these sections. I just thought it was so.
Well, we've had the
colorful.
opportunity to see this similar type of brain sketch before, and I personally love it. And I also like that yours is much more colorful.
Well, it looks like looks like an ice cream. Anyway, another side. So here's the thing. What we can do is we can find ways to unlock it. So it's going to get locked up. It's going to get locked up for different reasons. And you may have these behaviors where you're like, why did I do that? Something in your brain is responding. So, and so we're going to talk a little bit about it. But first, let's go to the next slide.
Oh, I'm diligent. I'm not being
That's okay.
diligent here.
Okay, so right now we're doing a super quick, no nerd introduction to your big, beautiful brain. And this will take about 2 to 3 minutes. That's all it's going to be. So here's the upshot. And if there's any neuro people in there, forgive me for the shorthand, because you know more about this than I do. However, in a shortcut way, The human brain is hardwired to detect trust and distrust in our interactions with others. Now, when we detect trust, our bodies release chemicals that are associated with love and bonding and collaboration. That stuff makes us feel safe. And trust hangs out in the part of the brain that's associated with social behavior, which would be listening, right? Or which would include listening. So in conversations, when we feel seen, heard, and understood by other people, we sense trust, we sense a feeling, and we can feel that really great brain chemical flush of well-being. I can trust this, I feel safe. And that flush then is going to enhance a lot of our executive functions. And those are the things that let us think strategically, offer compassion, provide connection, and we can respond with creativity when we think about the future, for example. On the other hand, when we detect distrust, our brains get bombarded with chemicals that are associated with fear and stress. And distrust hangs out in the part of the brain that detects a threat. So in conversations, if we sense a threat to our identity, to our power, to our pride, to something like that, and if it goes unchecked, like if we don't know that that's what we're if that's getting triggered, we can respond by doing 4 things. We can fight, flee, freeze, or appease. And doing that can reduce our creativity, it can lower empathy, and it can impair our judgment. And it can totally impede deliberate listening. So clearly then, trust is our happy place, okay? So trust equals good, distrust, not so good in terms of deliberate listening. So Nancy, Nancy, you may be asking, okay, so here's the thing. How do we know in the moment? How do we know in the moment which thing is getting triggered? I think the most amazing thing that I have learned is SCARF. And it stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So if it is threatened, we're going to move away. And if it feels, we're going to move away from the person or the situation in front of us. If it feels safe, we're going to move toward. So becoming aware of what might be threatened when you're feeling like it's hard to listen, that can give you a clue about where you're at. So let's just talk about this real quick. So these 5 things are the 5 domains of human social experience. And I have found this to be a game changer for myself. So let's go through it real quick. Status has to do with where you are in relation to other people around you. C is for certainty. Yeah.
Does this have anything is this for the speaker or for the listener, or is it for all of us?
It's for all of us.
Okay.
It's for all of us.
Okay.
So so you are so much ahead of me. And that's good. No. Nancy was so ahead of me this morning. We were trying to get our software to talk to each other. So then C is for certainty, and that concerns being able to just, have a certain amount of predictability, like you can predict a little bit of the future. A is for autonomy. That's like a sense of agency and control over events. R is for relatedness, a sense that you are safe with others, that you're with a friend as opposed to a foe. And finally, F is just for plain old fairness. There's a perception that there's going to be like an impartial and just exchange between people. So each letter here in this acronym actually stands for a social need that in the brain, it is treated in much the same way as our physical need for food and water are. And they're perceived as being just as vital. So if something is threatened, we are going to have a reaction as noticeable and understandable as hunger or thirst would be.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're feeling great, we're going to be like, all those things feel really acknowledged and known. So if you're feeling triggered in a conversation, or you're sensing that the person that you're listening to is maybe triggered, you can try using the SCARF model just to identify which of these 5 factors, and it could be all of them or just one, might be feeling threatened. It just gives you a little, like a little clue, a little glimpse into it. And so the exercise could help you understand your motivations and your needs, but also the person you're listening to. And that can help you both just hear each other better. If like that's what's going on. And I mean, I'll tell you, just on my ride over here this morning, I had a little tiff with my husband in the car. And I realized that he said something, I forget what, and like I'm a grown woman. And inside I thought, you're not the boss of me.
That
Tell me
totally
that.
just showed
Tell
up.
me that. My autonomy. I was like, and thank God I was able to go, of course he's not the boss of you. Just stop it. But it just came up. It just came up. But I was able to check it. And I even said to him, I'm sorry I snapped. I felt a little controlled. You weren't controlling me. That was just me. And I was like, look at us talking like grown-ups. I mean, it was wild. It was just wild. So like this stuff can really help, right? Okay, so that's one thing. A second thing that can help you in your listening, remember these 3 words: food, money, and sex. So get this, a Harvard study found that acts of self-disclosure, that means if we're giving our thoughts, views, or opinions, those are accompanied by spurts of like this heightened activity in our brain, the same place that's associated with a sense of reward and satisfaction that comes from food, money, and sex. So no wonder it's so hard to just shut up. It feels really good not to, like just like a good meal and all that other stuff, it feels good. So again, you can just use this knowledge to get better in your listening to other people so that you're not always hogging the mic, to use the term. So hearing people out, doing follow-up questions that indicate you heard them, and then hearing them out again will light up their parts of the brain that are like reward, satisfaction. So you can think of it as kind of like a gift that you're going to give them. So if you're feeling this urge to just give an opinion, don't blame yourself. It's just your brain doing what it does. But you can have dominion over your brain and go, I'm going to give it to that person. You can give them that kind of a gift. So that's the second one. The third thing has to do with power. Power can make it really hard for us to listen. Now, we all hold power at different points in our lives, and maybe even throughout the day. Like if you have a kid, you have a toddler, you're at home, you're the boss. There we go. There we go again with the boss thing, but you have the power.
But you're literally talking about being the boss. Too.
Absolutely.
We all have that boss that
right.
has the power.
That is such a good point. Yes,
Yeah.
That is exactly it.
Okay.
So during the day, though, we can hold different levels of power throughout the day, depending on where we're at. And research shows, however, that when you have power over another, it can diminish your ability to listen closely and to hear the people over whom you have power. Now, there's one study from the Journal of Experimental Psychology, and they say that, I'm just going to read it here, the powerful people, because they're in control, they don't listen carefully to the people over whom they have power because they don't have to, because those people are not a threat. Those people don't control any resources that they might need if they don't listen to them. And then in contrast, the people over whom they do have power, they are super motivated to pay attention. So Nancy's my boss. She might not be listening to me because she's like, well, it's Ronnie and I've got 50 other people and I have to go see my boss. But I'm paying close attention to what Nancy's saying because she controls the resources. And the resources could be she controls whether I get a good job review, whether or not she'll give me off next Tuesday when I have to take my kid to a doctor, whether I get a promotion, so there's that power gap, like a little bit of what we were referring to with Nicole earlier. Everyone's always trying to find like where's the balance here. The really good news about this, the research shows that simply having knowledge that that's just a hazard of the gig, whether the gig is being a mom or being a boss, just having knowledge of that can be enough for you to go, oh, wait, there's that power thing. Let me take a breath. Okay, Nancy, what did you want to tell me? You know what I mean? And so just having knowledge of it, it's really rooted in kind of a survival thing. Like we're still all hardwired. How do I survive? But power is a very big thing. So once you know that and you know where you stand at each power interaction you have, that can also give you insight into, am I listening? Is there a chance I'm not listening? Whatever. Okay, and then the fourth thing, and this is the most important. This is the thing I talked about earlier, being right. And I saved it for the last because actually it's the biggest thing that keeps us from listening. Now, when I began doing my deep dive into listening, like 6 or 7 years, wow, more than that. Yeah. Just looking into what makes for good listening. And I realized that this is the biggest thing. And back then, when I first started, I realized that the very best listeners were the people who absolutely did not need to be right. they were, at least in conversations, they were more interested in hearing what you had to say than in telling you what they thought about it. They were just curious, and they didn't need to be right. If you said something, they would be like, wow, I never thought about that. Like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like there's like this absence of ego, or this absence of ego as we think is a bad thing.
Mhm.
And they were some of the most actualized people I've just ever met in my life, because their first instinct was to choose connection over being right. Even if you said something that really insulted them, and
I'm listening to what you're saying,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm thinking about our own value systems, and if somebody were to say something that was negative against my value system, that's my sense of self, my dignity.
that's exactly it. Dignity is huge. Dignity is huge. You really nailed it. In fact, if you go to this next slide, you're going to see how well you nailed it.
Oh,
Dignity.
right.
See that? You're like reading tea leaves here. So dignity is huge. Donna Hicks is a researcher, and she studies dignity, and she's at Harvard. And she does a lot of interventions in like war-torn countries where there's great conflict. And so she really, she says that dignity is the single most powerful force that motivates our behaviors. That many people would rather die or kill than surrender their dignity. That's what they would do. Now, I don't, I'm sure not many of us here think that that's what we would do, but sometimes, you get really worked up. If somebody, insulted my dignity, I wouldn't necessarily keep quiet about it. I wouldn't get violent.
But I think that one of the things that we see in Philadelphia is when dignity is insulted, there's a gun that comes next.
Oh my gosh, that is exactly it.
Mhm.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's how important that is to us.
Right.
So again, we could do what we would do when we feel like we're not safe. We could either fight, flee, freeze, or appease. Dignity's been, it's like, whoa, hold on, everybody. Dignity's been insulted. Dignity's been threatened, the whole thing. So of those four things, fight, flight, freeze, or appease, the fight response is the most damaging one. And unfortunately, it's the most common one. And that goes back to the brain again,
Okay.
because that's partly due to this brain process that when you argue and win, here's the other thing, your brain floods with, again, these neurochemicals that make you feel good and dominant and even invincible. So that's pretty potent. That's a pretty potent draw.
Mhm.
And it's a feeling that, if you're not checking it, you want to replicate it because it feels good. Like there's that, it's kind of a high. It could even feel like this, I'm out of control, but it's really something, like it's pretty invincible. So then the question, I think, for all of us becomes, so how do we get out of it? How do we get out of all this? And the answer, I think, is that we just take this knowledge that we've done today, which is actually pretty straightforward. Like you don't have to go to some college and get 18 degrees about this. You could do, like, if you just did even 5 of those 12 things, or over the course of your lifetime, you did 1 here, 1 there, the quality of your listening, your ability to connect would be given a better shot. Like we'd have a better shot at that because we were able to hold still long enough to let those different behaviors work some of their magic. It's cool. So by using all that, what it realizes is that we don't have to be tyrannized, by our own, survival instincts. But we have to do that. To do that, we have to be bold enough to act.
So
On
can
the
you
knowledge
tell
that
us-
we're not going to be we're not going to be tyrannized.
Yeah.
Use the word. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. So, okay, right. So what would that look like? I think it looks like decision making. It looks like you make, no, here we go.
like us.
Oh, look at my long hair. There we are. Yeah, it looks like decision making, because when we make a deliberate decision, right when we feel that those stirrings of being argumentative, if we make the deliberate decision to suspend our right to be right for just long enough to find out what being right might keep us from hearing, that allows a few things to happen. We can then listen with more curiosity and less judgment, with more affection and less disinterest, with more compassion and less stridency, basically with more joy. And I think we are so capable, like we can feel joy every day. It doesn't have to be, I won the lottery. Joy is available to us every day. And we can do that because now we know better, so we can listen better. So we can. There you go, the end. Not really,
But will we?
but will we?
Yeah.
But will we? So that's the big question, right? So now we have all this information.
Mhm.
Are we going to do it? Like, will we? And it's a really tall, it's a tall ask. And I have to say that at first, when you do it, it can feel lonely. I'm just going to say it can feel kind of lonely because we don't see a lot of deliberate listening modeled in the bigger world right now.
I think it's, like a little scary too,
Yeah, because
you
you're
don't know
like,
how the other person's going to respond or how they're going to react, and or how you might be judged.
how you might be judged. And also, if you really listen, I know, I'm sure this has happened to you too, because you're a compassionate person. If I really
Thank
listen to
you.
someone, they may say something and I feel moved to tears.
Oh.
And then I'm like, oh God, now I'm feeling.
Do you
feeling-
know, Ronnie, that happened to me yesterday
Did
down
it?
in the lobby, and you came through our lobby and you saw
Yeah.
they just fixed it up, and we had this new building manager, lovely person.
Mhm.
And so she's being judged up, down,
Oh,
sideways, and
yeah.
people were bitching at her about renovations. And I saw her in the lobby, and she saw me as I was coming in yesterday. And she says, "Oh, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. And let me tell you, this is all just lovely." As I was, motioning to
Yeah.
the lobby. And I said, "When I walk in the door now, I feel welcome." And she said, "Oh, you're going to make me cry." And she did start to cry. And I went over and I said, "Oh," and I gave her a hug, and I thought that's probably the first time I ever hugged a building manager. But
But what a moment.
What
What a moment.
yeah,
And you had what? And wasn't that joy?
that was
was this
very
beautiful,
joyous. And I
connected
had a
joy.
big smile and felt great for the rest of the day.
Right. And you build a connection, and who knows what that has done. She might have been thinking, I'm leaving this job tomorrow, but now she's like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe she felt like she belonged. Could
I
be.
hope so.
Could be. So you obviously get it. So here's the question though. So it's a big ask, but the human cost of us not listening and truly understanding each other is really heartbreaking. We know it. And it contributes to all the most pressing problems we have. High rates of suicide, depression, substance abuse, violence,
Yeah.
and our disconnection from each other in politics. Okay, we don't have to even talk about that. It's stifling the collaboration we need to address not just our countries, but the globe's biggest problems right now.
Mhm.
And let's not get started on social media, where there's just an utter lack of nuanced, curious, and open-hearted listening to each other.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a total spew fest out there. So it's like we've made this, it's like all of this makes me think that we somehow have created this national industry of letting people know you don't belong.
Mhm.
What a miserable thing.
And you
So-
have no value, and you're worthless,
There you go.
and you're stupid.
All right, Nancy.
Okay, that's enough.
No, except you're right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. That's it. So as you start your own deliberate listening practice, you may not have a lot of company. And as you begin to do it, but I promise you that you're going to feel so much more connected to people, you and your building manager, so much more connected to the world that you won't even notice. And you're going to begin drawing people to you anyway, because you're going to make them feel so seen, heard, and known. It'll be like you have a superpower. And they're just going to feel great. They're going to feel great being around you. And they won't know why, but you will. Because by then, you will have done listening, so much deliberate listening, and you're going to do it imperfectly. Know that. And that's totally permitted. There's no perfect. You will do it imperfectly, and that's going to be awesome. And by then you will have done enough of it that you will be so experienced, even unconsciously, at creating conditions that support connection and belonging by deliberately choosing to listen with curiosity, which is perceived as interest, instead of judgment, which can cut off connection.
Mhm.
You'll be creating conditions where you're listening with an open mind, which is intrigued by new information, instead of bias, which just shuts it down. You're going to listen with compassion, which creates feelings of safety, instead of contempt, which just exploits people's vulnerability. And you'll be listening with empathy, which strengthens our relatedness, instead of indifference, which is, I think, just the worst, because that just isolates us.
Mhm.
And one day, very soon, I promise you, you're going to start yourself by saying, hey, this listening stuff is actually really fun. This is fun. So that's my promise to you.
Well, I appreciate that, Ronnie. And this has been great. And I just love you. And
Oh,
I've enjoyed your journey of listening, going back to Clark Park and that page, the front page of the Inquirer, that you were on. That was so amazing.
we'll tell people about that in the
Yeah,
Q&A.
we can
if
tell
they
you
want.
that later. Yeah. And but before we get there, let me just ask you, whatever about that guy at Pixar? Whatever.
Oh, the guy at Pixar?
Pixar.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, where's our thing? Yeah, so, okay, the guy at
Oh,
Pixar.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
The answer's here.
There he is, blown away. So the guy at Pixar, Chuck Kolstad, I call him the unsung hero, as I said earlier, because other than in one book about Pixar, the guy's barely mentioned anywhere at all when people talk about Pixar's history, even though he's the person who ignited that extraordinary pivot to that little group, and it changed the whole direction of the film industry, the animation industry. And he actually left the company not too long afterward in a reshuffling. He's in his 70s now. He's still around. He's retired. And if you look at his LinkedIn profile, his time at Pixar is actually pretty far down because he's done a lot. He did a lot before. He did a lot afterward. And he worked in manufacturing and supply chain management. What I loved on his LinkedIn page, he says, and I'm going to quote him here. He says, I have a track record of enabling my teams to achieve exceptional results while having fun doing it. And to me, his Pixar story epitomizes how to make deliberate listening fun. And with a little practice, I think we all can. And I think it can take us anywhere. And as Buzz Lightyear would say, to infinity and beyond.
Hey, thank you so much,
You're
Ronnie.
welcome. You're
Now, I'm
welcome.
going to stop sharing and we're going to start seeing each other. And
Oh,
I know that we've got some questions and we've got plenty of time. We're doing really well
yeah,
on
we're good.
time.
Okay.
And if I can see that Jamal is having some conversations. If anybody would like to do what Nicole did and be on screen, we can do that too.
I would love that.
But
It's
before
always
we
nice to
do
see
that,
people's
I would
faces.
really like to have Ronnie share her Clark Park's story, because that's such a great story. I love that story.
Okay, all right. So real quick. So I had been a columnist at the Philadelphia Daily News, and I was there for 23 years altogether. People would call a columnist usually when something had gone wrong, and usually something went wrong because somebody who should have listened didn't listen. So they would call and say, PGW won't fix my bill. They would call and say, my kid's school teacher is this, blah, 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 blah. So they would call, they would tell these stories. And there's sometimes, you have to have some discernment and some judgment and decide, I don't know if that really is appropriate for the column. I don't know if that would actually work. I mean, I have my own sort of system of things. Sometimes I'd say, I think you need a lawyer. I don't think you need a columnist, but I'm so sorry for what happened to you. And so sometimes I'd have to tell them, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be able to do a column about it. 9 out of 10 times, they would not be angry. They would say, that's okay. Just feels so good to be listened to. Thank you. And I'm like, oh my God, you poor guy. You had no one to hear you out. You had to call a total stranger. And so I would just listen. I listened.
Mhm.
But after a while, I was actually feeling, I was feeling like a little bad about how often I had to say no. And I had to render a judgment about what they were saying. And I was getting burned out on making judgments, right?
Mhm.
So there was this arts festival that was happening in Clark Park in West Philly. And I thought, I need one day where I sit and listen to people the way I do at work, but there's no expectation that I have to judge what they had to say.
Or fix anything.
Or
Mhm.
make any phone calls or anything. So there was this arts festival and I signed up and said, I want to do an event, I want to do my own exhibit called The Art of Listening. And it's just going to be me in 2 chairs. And they're like, sounds good. I'm like, what? You actually said yes. So I took these 2 chairs from my living room and I put a sign up in the middle and it said, I will listen with compassion, without judgment, and with an open heart. Is there something you'd like to tell me? I will listen. And I'm like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever done. And I sat down and people came all day long. I told nobody I was going to do it because I thought, my family would be like, there she goes, doing that thing. It was so much fun. People sat down all day long. I just listened. They talked. And then sometimes I talked because they were really into the groove of it. And by the end of the day, it's like I was high. I was just high. We're hugging goodbye. There was one guy who sat down and then like he wouldn't get up. And I had to gently say, oh, there's like a line, like I had to move him along. But it was great. And it kind of rebooted my spirit because it was feeling bad to judge people, but it was also part of my job to exercise discernment about what could work and what couldn't. But that was really fun.
Yeah, and the part that one of the things that's my favorite about this story is that Ronnie's editor said to her, "What? You did what? This is a great story." And then the next thing you know, she's on the front page. And I can still see that front page. And that began this whole new journey for you in your life. And I'm hoping that we have some questions about this positive therapy, this new journey that you're on now.
Yeah, well, it's called positive psychology. It's not therapy what I'm doing, but yeah. No, that's okay.
That because you never know what it is you're doing or the conversation that you're having, that'll be that moment that takes you in a whole other direction that you may not even realize at that time.
Absolutely.
But suddenly look at you, and that we're at a time in our world where journalism is not necessarily respected anymore. And it's great that you're able to walk away from it and do something that brings you equal joy and does good for the people of this world. And all because you just sat and listened.
Oh yeah, it makes me so thankful. I feel so thankful. It's just this wackadoodle idea. And so that had happened. I think it was on a Saturday. Monday I go into work and I told, like, there's only 2 friends there who knew I was going to do it. My boss came up and he's like, because I have to write column, he's like, all right, what do you got? And they're like, you should hear what she did this week. And I'm like, it's stupid. And I told him about it and he's like, oh, you're writing that. He goes, did you get any photos at least? I'm like, no, I didn't take pictures. But one woman who was there did take a picture. And I said to her, because we exchanged numbers because we became besties.
Yeah.
And I'm like, could I use that photo? And then it was on the front cover. And I'm like, oh, well.
Yeah.
So
I
much
remember
for
that photo. That was a great photo too.
It was fun. Oh,
So
glad you liked it. Thanks for sharing such nice things.
thank you, Ronnie. And I would sit here and continue to speak to Ronnie till our time is up, but I'm going to let Jamal jump in and bring us some questions, and maybe even some other people will join us on screen.
Yeah.
Well, it was an amazing presentation, Ronnie, and thank you for
thanks, Jamal.
It raised some things in my head, especially I'll get to a question I have about the dignity slide. But if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask Ronnie, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I have a couple of questions here. First, I'll go with Brittany's question. She says she's curious how to practice deliberate listening when there is conflict, in the middle of conflict, or if the listener is triggered by something that the speaker said. How do you practice deliberate listening when things are happening, going on? In the moment.
Go ahead.
No, in the moment. I was just
okay. I would say the best thing you can do is to have compassion for everybody, for the person who is being triggered, for yourself, for how bad you're feeling, for how badly you don't want to say the wrong thing. You can, in those moments, you can replace judgment with compassion. You could even say to a person, this is so hard, isn't it? This is really hard. You could even say, if it's, I would like to say, I'd like to take a few minutes and just take a deep breath. I really got off on the wrong foot here. I don't want to do that. I value you. I care about you. And I think we can do this. And I'd like to try again. Would you be willing to try again? And I would like to say, I'm really sorry that I was just testy there. It's not the way I want to be. It's not the person I want to be. Sometimes sometimes my emotions get the better of me. Could we try again? And if you need to think about it, that's okay. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee and I'll be back. You can do that. You can break that, and you can do it with some kindness and with acknowledgement of how it's hard, and with an offer, which I think looks like goodwill, to say, I'd like to try again because you matter to me, because we matter, because this matters. And I'd like us to try to get it right. And I'd like to learn. I don't know many people who would just, give you the finger and say no. And if they do, okay, you tried, you tried.
And you can know it has nothing to do with you, that's for sure.
It even might. It could be that they say, you know what, I'm so tired of this with you. And you go, okay. I mean, there's sometimes, you're not going to make people your best friends, maybe, if you have a history.
But if I may.
Yeah.
The story that you told us just a little bit earlier about the conversation you had with your husband on the way over here, I think that's a great example of when you were feeling triggered.
Right.
And so you didn't, jump on him and judge him and walk away mad.
Mhm.
You stopped and said, oh, wait,
Mhm.
and you acknowledged that with him,
Mhm.
and you walked away friends, because we all get triggered.
Mhm.
We all feel badly when certain things are said.
Yeah.
And the person who said it didn't necessarily mean it that way.
Right.
And it's trying to stop. And I'm going to share something about my friend Jamal. I went through a really, really rough time during the pandemic, and I was getting triggered right and left. And my friend Jamal was always there to remind me, that it's not you, Nancy, that, to be there to support me, until now I can hear some of those same people and say, yeah, they have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with me. And
Wow.
I'm perfectly fine.
Wow.
And so I don't think there ever comes a time in our lives when we've got those 12 things down, we're good.
I sure don't.
No. And it's not going to be a permanent forever thing. We're going to have bad days.
Yeah.
And that we
Mhm.
acknowledge that maybe we're having a bad day.
Yeah.
And thank you for letting me speak.
No, oh my gosh, are you kidding? As you were saying that, I realized that the thing that made me able to do that with my husband is that, I'll be honest here. We've been going through some things over the last few months. There's been a couple of things that have just been irritating both of us. And I've been impatient just in general, and then I'm impatient with him. And the whole thing about like when I talked about how the most actualized people I ever met were people who didn't need to be right. They valued connection over being right.
Yeah.
And I realized that with my husband, I had been valuing being right over my connection with him. I don't want to threaten my connection with him. I mean, we've been married for I can't even forget, 37 years. I mean, I value this man. And just remember, oh, that's right. We are connected. I value that. I don't need to be right. I do want to tell you if something's going on with me, like I'm the expert on me. I'm the expert on me. So
Right.
But I don't want to do that in a way that somehow batters our connection. But it's a choice. It's a choice. And some days when I'm tired, I'm like, screw that. I'm right. Oh, I did it again. So, and it happens. It happens.
Yeah. And I think for me, like, with some of my experience and looking at those things, a lot of self-acknowledgement comes in those things. I think that in times when things aren't perfect and there are things going on, it's almost more important to realize how important it is to deliberately listen than to just really plow through things and to sit back and notice these things about yourself. Somebody might say something that triggers you, but you don't have to respond in that way. You can take a beat, take that breath, and then respond in a way that'll help the situation instead of escalate it.
That is, you said a mouthful there. You sure did. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Our Jamal is a good man.
Thank you, Nancy. So this is more of a statement, but I want to kind of get your feel for it or what your take on it is. Yemi says that listening is very important, but the innovations that we have nowadays tech and digital tools to streamline processes makes it harder to introduce the feedback we listen from employees. For example, services that are used to provide by individuals are now being transitioned to digital tools, but there are still people that are not sure how to use the digital tools or have poor accessibility for the broadband or devices. We listen to their concerns, but have limited resources to deploy meaningful alternatives to those who are sharing their experience. So I wonder what your thoughts are about the technology part of what this is kind of brought about in this age that we're in. You know, how we do everything from a technology lens now, when we try to change how we interact with people and give people more options. But is it hurting or is it helping?
I think each case it's going to be individual. You know, like I know during the pandemic, it was really hard for certain families whose kids had disabilities for them to get the services that they needed. Their kids were not able to be in front of the screen. It just didn't work. You know, they really, really suffered. There were some other kids who had been bullied in school, and being behind a screen, they felt some real safety and autonomy for the first time in a while. It can be friend or foe, but I would, I probably shouldn't say it's more foe, because we're having this webinar right now because of digital technology, right? But I do worry about how just some of the face-to-face interactions aren't as possible. Even if someone is telling me something and they're upset, if they were with me, I can go, God, I'm so sorry. Right. You know, like just touch, you know, even just touch and body language. So it can take effort. But I do know, I mean, I think that's a real concern with workplaces and with people who are dealing with clients who then are not digitally savvy, and all they want is something as primal as being listened to, you know? So I wish I had answers. I don't have answers, but I really share the concerns. I really, really share those concerns.
So Carolyn asks, what advice do you have for those of us who are very strong empaths? We do tend to listen intently to others and often are affected strongly by the pain and suffering and sadness that others feel.
Yeah. And I'm going to say there's probably a good portion of this group that falls in that category.
Oh, I think so too. I mean, it's really, I mean, that's what I said, you know, the whole thing about will we listen more? For some people, they are already, they are giving so much, and they feel things deeply. And I would say maybe speak with some others, maybe get a little bit of, I don't even want to say help or therapy, but
peer support.
Peer support. That's the word. Peer support, so that you still have something left for yourself. Because what you're giving is probably so valuable to the people around you. And my wish for you is that you see that you are as important of your attention and care as you're giving to others. And if that means that sometimes you just have to say no, you have to say no, because otherwise you have nothing left for yourself. And you're as worthy of your empathy and care and time as other people are. And that can be hard. And I think especially for some women, especially where it's kind of how we're raised. But I think in the, you know, obviously in the caring fields, it's really tougher.
One of my favorites, if I can add this one, is, you know, put your mask on first, that we've all heard, you know, used in conversations and in airplanes. Get on the mail, put your mask on first before you help anyone. And if we're not taking good care of ourselves, to this person who asked the question and anybody else who's dealing with it, you're not going to be able to help anyone else.
Right.
And I can tell you my personal stories, which I won't, that happened during the time of the pandemic, where I had no choice but to learn how to take care of myself.
Wow.
Because I've never in my life made that a priority. And now I know I need to. And I am such a much better person when I'm taking care of myself. And I'm not talking about Manny pennies. I'm just saying, you know, even if it's 15 minutes in the morning and it's quiet time in bed before anybody calls, and
I woke her up this morning. I thought she was one of those early risers. I'm a super
not.
early riser. I'm up
She's
by
not.
4:30 every day. Wrong conversation. I thought you said that. It was some, I called her at 8:30, like, hey, and she was like, hello. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought you were the early riser. I said, was I wrong? She said, yes, you were wrong.
She will stay up late with you though, Ronnie.
That's right.
Oh, I'm in bed by 8 o'clock. I'm like, good night. Yeah.
But anyway, to find whatever that is, and I will tell you with certainty that even that 15 minutes in the morning for me, in that quiet time, when my cat curls up on me, just gives me such, uplifts me to give me the energy for the day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say to everyone out here who's listening, please take care of yourselves. Please take care of yourselves.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, I think, I mean, I definitely went through a phase where I was taking care of everybody and then realized I had to take care of myself. And I thought it was hard because I didn't think I was worthy of it.
Yes. And we are worthy.
We're worthy. But I somehow I thought, well, I'm not worthy of my own time. You are.
Right.
What? Like that's
Right.
what? Like where did that come from? You know?
Mhm.
Had to work that out with a couple really close friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, just some like peer support.
No, it's
basically.
true. You
Mhm.
do. And I just went through a period of something similar to that with a friend, my best friend,
Mhm.
who passed away 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
and
yes.
it's the joy of our time together when we talked about these things.
Yeah.
And she was encouraging me to take care of myself,
Mhm.
and how the things that she learned in her life, where she was always there to take care of others, and that she passed that on to me, that she's like, she said, if you don't do it once I die, she says, I'm going to haunt you. And she probably will too. And that there was such beauty and joy in that learning too. So I think for everyone, I would say there's somebody out there, whether it's a family member, a friend, there's somebody that or maybe somebody you haven't contacted in a while, who can play that role with you, who can remind you about how worthy you are and help you when you need somebody to listen, to what it is you're going through, or has experienced something similar. This is, thank you, Ronnie, for letting me be a part of this.
Letting you, it's like it's her gig. And I'm really sorry about your friend.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Wow.
So,
Jamal.
Ronnie, I wanted to ask you about dignity, right? Because I look at it a little bit differently. Because I look at it more as a pride thing
Okay.
when that happens.
Okay.
And I was trying to discern the difference between dignity and pride, right? So
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research, and dignity contains humility and gratitude that invites people towards us,
Oh,
where
wow.
pride often exudes an arrogance or egotism that repels people. And I think the prideful part is the part that people hear. They don't understand that their dignity isn't necessarily affected. It's the pride in them that makes them want to say, no, you can't do that to me.
Yeah.
And so, like, because I've had this conversation with friends. I'm originally from Philadelphia. Grew up, born and raised between West Philly and Southwest Philly.
Oh, wow.
And I now live in Harrisburg, but all of my family is still back in Philly, and I get over there to visit. And I have always had this conversation with my friends. I worked at St. Gabriel's Hall for 17 years.
Seriously? Oh,
Yes.
I know it well. Yeah, we'll have to talk about it.
So the issue that we would always talk about is with the youth of what is it that would affect them. And I really feel strongly that they're so prideful because they don't have much, right? Like they come from broken families, and they're dealing with a lot of things that young people shouldn't have to deal with. And the only thing that they have to hold on to is, I'm not going to allow you to do this to me. And so any sign of disrespect or anything that they consider, disrespect, they bite back at. And it's
Yeah.
because of that pride. Like this is the only thing that I have, you know what I mean? I don't have
Absolutely.
much money, I don't have much food, I don't have much of anything else. And so I bite back because now you're damaging the only thing that I have, and I feel like I have to protect that.
That is such, you really nailed it. And if you go back to that scarf model, status, look at that for them, 5 things. Status, do they have any status? They're in a boys' home. The poor kids are in a boys' home. Certainty, they may not know where they're going to be next week or next month. Autonomy, people are telling them where to live, what school you're going to go to. Relatedness, what does that do? It's like, you don't even see me or know me. And fairness, how is this fair?
Right.
How is this fair? Those kids are probably totally lit up. Their scarf factors are screaming, and they should be, because no human being can survive for long when those 5 things are not like seen and honored, you know? So boy, that's really, wow. I mean, for you to work with those kids, those are kids who are really dealing with a lot, you know, and they've been dealt a bad hand, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I'm seeing real quick. You see in the chat, Nancy?
We weren't supposed to have the certificate of attendance in here. We were supposed to have the evaluation link. And
I posted both.
okay, let's make sure the evaluation link works. Is that this one? Hard deliberate listening. Yeah, that would be this one. And it's not a click link, which I know makes people crazy. I really need people to fill out the evaluation. Why do I say that? Because I actually read them and make decisions based upon them. And your comments and thoughts are very important to me. And it's how we make decisions about who our next speaker will be. So I'm hoping that you all can get the evaluation link to work. When I send out the email to everybody, I'm going to put the evaluation link in that email, as well as their certificate of attendance in that email. Okay. And but if you can get into the evaluation link from here and could do that today, I would be very, very grateful. And my friend Jamal is over there at his keyboard, so I think he's going to try. And here's the evaluation form. Oh, I'm not getting it when I do it.
Oh, something popped up.
Oh, there it goes. I've got one that's working. Yay!
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
okay, but if you can't get it, I'll send it out to you. Jamal, I know we're getting close to the end.
Yeah, we have
And
3 minutes.
yeah, and
3 critical minutes.
and unfortunately, people have to go to work instead of hang out with us.
Aw.
So,
I real quick, Ronnie, I want to pass this on from Lisa. She said, I believe you are the writer who did a series on families with children with special needs years ago at the Enquirer.
Yeah, that was me.
And it was phenomenal. She said she appreciate what you wrote and that you understand what the families go through, as well as who you have been in the field for years. Thank you.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I just want to say, people who work with people who have disabilities and their families, especially as the families age, because their kids are aging, you are God's hands and feet in the world. You are not paid enough. You are not compensated enough for your time, for your heart, for your energy. We are paying too much money to the wrong people. When I found out how much, especially direct support workers, do not make, some of them were making $7 an hour. Are you kidding me?
right.
How is this possible?
Right. And we're still saying in the city of Philadelphia, it's okay to pay somebody $7.25 an hour. Seriously?
To take care of another human being who is needy and can't do it. Oh, just don't get me. Oh, that's another thing. Oh, I'm coming over there. No. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, I love doing that series.
We all thank you.
Yeah.
We all thank you.
Yeah,
and we're here for you too. And if there's anything that we can help you with as far as topics or whatever, let me know too.
Yeah.
Okay. Jamal, did you have like another question that you wanted to ask before we end, or are we done?
No, we are good. We are good.
I appreciate Jamal's questions always because he has an interesting insight into anything that we do. He's also my cultural expert, and helps me to be sure that I'm on target culturally. And the interesting thing is that we live together in the same city. Literally, I could walk to where he lived. He could have walked over to see me, and didn't know each other until he was in Harrisburg. But that we've lived in the same city and have had similar experiences with different outcomes.
Mm.
And that too, to me, has been very important
Mhm.
of, what it's like,
Yeah.
for some of us,
Mhm.
and how it manifests.
You bet.
And I find that all to be very important in what we're doing here.
Mhm.
I appreciate so much the people I know I'm saying what Ronnie just said, but that the work that's being done in our audience is so critical. And I told a story in the state leadership meeting just a couple of weeks ago about my life. And maybe someday we'll tell you all, but that what supports are out there and how it impacts the lives of the people with the needs, and how important the work is. And it is, I'm just so proud to be a part of all of this and proud of every single one of you that's doing their part to be a part of this mental health community. And I thank you all.
Mhm. Amen.
Jamal, are we good?
We are good. Thank you all for attending. Ronnie, thank you so much again. I appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for having
and
me.
everything that you've done. And we hope to see everyone during our next presentation.
Which is the secret.
Which is a secret. We're not saying. We're keeping our lips sealed.
So
on
watch
it.
your email.
So keep an eye out for that. So until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jamal. Thank
Have
you.
a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thanks for everything you do.
Bye.